Hey guys. So yeah, I'm gonna do this again here. You know how YouTube's algorithm are and everything. You don't want to chance anything with them or what they might read. But I wanted to come on here to give you the second, the not second, but the next review in the Melting Mei series. As you can tell, it's spelled Mei, and it's by DezzieArts, and that's her name right there, DezzieArts, right there. As a matter of fact, yeah, it's basically what it is, Desi Arts, right there. If I can just take that out, there we go. Yeah, there we go, Desi Arts. But yeah, she originally, when she does this series annually, she does it basically like every May. And she tries to conclude it every May, maybe with a preview into the next season or next year, if you will. But unfortunately, when she decided to, and I say it with all due respect, no offense, because I enjoy her work. When she decided to release it on Monday of last month, I think she didn't notice that Monday was a shorter length of time, weekly, instead of like Thursday or Friday or Saturday. But so she had to carry it on to at least June, at least this week and next week. And what's interesting about this part here is it continues off at the end of the last part because in the last part, basically, Mei took advantage of a situation. Zarha was tired, and Libby was kind of exhausted because she had to keep, Mei occupied. Because Mei basically, and that's her name right there, the Mei. Mei was basically getting restless because it's like they had been cooped up at their home, their apartment or whatever, for the new home and apartment, if you will, for quite some time and all because of the fact that what happened at the beginning is they got involved with this girl they met at a club when they were fused into one person, and then they kind of shapeshifted into a guy and got to know this girl and pretty much got intimate with her. And what happened is because they got intimate, they ended up basically giving a bit of themselves eternally into this girl, and this girl ended up basically taking on their powers a little bit, but mostly the melting powers and all that, basically melting into goo. She was able to restore. She was able to, re-solidify, restore herself and everything, unbeknownst to herself, I should say. And she just didn't know exactly what happened. Thinks she drank too much, a little bit of hangover. But Zahara, being like the, I guess you could say, the brains of the quadruple, or the quartet, if you will, wanted to know more. She wanted to know more about exactly what happened, how they caused this, and everything, and what the effects would be. And basically, she had been researching at least, and this continued on. Basically, this all began in the first one, which was 20, then 21, and everything. And then 22, she was basically continuously doing it and everything. And, Libby, who was basically her daughter, her and Mei and Elizabeth's daughter, who was created through a fusion that they, a very melty, intimate fusion that they, a shapeshifty, melty fusion, gooey fusion that they did to each other at the end of last year's installment of the series. And basically, Levi, if you will, is helping out a little bit, having fun shapeshifting into a snake and all that, and then she goes and keeps, and they basically they can also basically read each other's minds as well because they're all connected on the same wavelength because of the powers and abilities. So what happens is that Libby goes and keeps Mei busy in the yard, so they fuse into a portion of Levi, and what happens, and that's at the end of chapter 22, part 22. So what happens last chapter is they come back in, and Mei lets it be known because Elizabeth asks her, because Elizabeth is trying to be more like the responsible one for a bit. But Elizabeth asks if she's, I guess you could say, satisfied and all that. Basically, she's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sedated, if you will. Basically, she's got everything, all the anxiousness and all that out of her, and me, I was like, yeah, Libby helped me get that out of me. I'm good. We're good. And Libby is obviously exhausted because again she's fused with Mei and she's got to keep her busy, keep her occupied, help her out. And Zahara, she's tuckered out because she's been researching almost nonstop to figure out, okay, how does this work, how does that work, and all that. So what happens is that Mei decides to take advantage of this when Elizabeth tells him, "Oh, go tell Zahara dinner's almost ready," because she's making dinner. And Mei decides to take advantage of this, and basically, because Libby's tired and Zahara's tired, she takes advantage, merges together with them. First, she merges with Libby, becomes this blonde-headed version, um, this new blonde-headed girl with strawberry hue in her hair, and she has Zahara merge with her via the upper region by turning gooey and just basically allowing herself to be absorbed. And then this new version that Mei takes control of, who becomes known as Melody eventually, decides to melt down into a gooey blob, go to the kitchen, sneak up on Elizabeth, and swallow her, basically absorb her into them, and they become, and by doing so, reforms into a complete version of the Melody character, and then goes out. Well, after eating something and everything, they go out. As Melody, they go out, and Mei is in complete control because what it is that yeah, Mei may have gotten some of her anxiousness taken care of at home, but it's the other side of the coin. It's that more lustful NFSW side of her that wants to be satisfied, that wants to be sedated, and everything, given satisfaction. And that's what she does as Melody. She goes and meets this guy. They go meet this guy that they bring back to his apartment. And then that's where it goes from there because then she decides to elongate. She starts to basically show off her powers a bit. And I think they've had a little too much to drink too. But she decides to show off her powers by having her clothing melt into her, and this being the Melody fusion, melt into her body. And then she elongates her tongue into like a snake tongue and then kind of like plays with the guy's face, kind of licks the guy's face a little bit or whatever you want to call it. And then she elongates her teeth into fangs and pierces his neck. And the reason she does that is mainly, if I'm going to try to get this as best as I can. She decides to do this. She decides to use her fangs to undo that right there, and then boom, this is what happens. They end up melting into a puddle of goop and everything. And what happens afterwards, and I'm going to try to get here, basically the girls do wake up. Let me try if I can see if I can get, let me go. Yeah, the girls basically do wake up the next day, and Mei still kind of like, right here, it says it right here, Mei still asleep. Um, basically Mei still asleep. She literally whirls into Elizabeth's arm, basically blending away, becoming part of Elizabeth for a bit because she's so out of it. But basically, what happens is that essentially they realize what occurred. Even Elizabeth's like, Mei, what did you get us into this time? And basically, it's like, Libby kind of takes a little bit of the blame, kind of blames herself a bit. And Zahara's like, no, don't worry, it's not your fault. None of us could stop Mei. And then glancing at Elizabeth, because they do separate, except for, like I said, Mei, allowed herself to be absorbed into Elizabeth's arm, becoming part of her. Zahara's like, hey, don't blame yourself. I don't think none of us could. And then by, giving Elizabeth a bit of a look, she's like, and if I'm honest, I'm not sure either of us wanted to. So basically they decide, okay, they need to leave before this guy wakes up. And, Zahara's like, look, and Zahara's like, look, what we did with this guy, more so than what we did with the girl, a train could come crashing into his place and it wouldn't wake him up. So basically, they decide they're going to go home and everything. And basically, they decide to take on the form of a feline cat or something like that. And, basically, Elizabeth is like, because they're thinking, how do we leave, the guy's place? And Zahara's like, could we do it as Melody? Um, and Elizabeth is like, all things considered, I prefer she or we be seen as little as possible. And she's like, besides, it was late and we were in his car. I doubt any of the neighbors could identify her, us. And, basically describes that she massages that being Elizabeth her temple, her head. Because unlike with Libby, it was hard not to think of Melody as herself because maybe it was because Mei who was in control. Or at least she's wondering that. Wondering, okay, maybe it wasn't, maybe unlike, because basically she's saying to herself, unlike Libby, who I think was able to think and everything, the last time they did it, Mei was the one in control. Mei basically let everything go. And, well, this took control and just will let loose. So anyway, they decide, because Libby's got this idea, because obviously she's realizing, okay, I don't need to take any of the blame. They decide to become a feline-like animal and get to the car, Mei's car, if you will, melt down into goo, slip in, and as goo, slip into the car and mold into Mei, who's now awake. So basically, what happens is they get home. They get home and everything, and Libby decides to separate herself and everything, but the other three decide, hey, we're going to stay as Melody for a bit and see what's going on. And basically, because they figure, um, that it's easier. In fact, Melody, the combined voice of Melody says it was Zahara's idea. She thought it might be easier to figure out how we were able to customize the potency in this form. And basically, Libby is like, call me if you need any help. And she's heading for the kitchen. Because she could sense that that there's more to this staying in the form of Melody than just, we need to research, see what's going on. And even Elizabeth is like, she didn't buy that for a second. And Zara's like, nope. And then Mia's like, well, we could do some research. So from a certain point of view, it would be true. And that's basically how it ends, because you could tell, what they're about to get into. But anyway, getting back to there we go. Well, yeah, basically, this was actually a decent continuation. Obviously, we're going to get part 25, and I had a feeling she was going to go for 25 parts, because why would you want to end on part 23, and why would you want to end in a way that's like, okay, well, this just happened, you got to explain it somehow in 24, and then continue it on in 25. And she normally ends these stories, even without the sneak peeks, by having the characters have a little bit more fun, and I think that's what we're about to get in part 25 next Monday. But anyway, though, I've enjoyed the series so far, and like I said, I do intend to do a live stream somehow eventually on this. So guys, keep an eye out for that. Hopefully, it'll be a live stream on the whole series, on the series as a whole. But give me your thoughts overall on it. Let me know if you've been watching it and paying attention to it. Comment down below, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and everything. Let me know what your thoughts are on the story overall, as a whole, and what do you think will happen in the final part. And until next time, guys, I will talk to you all later. God bless. Take care.